Good morning, everybody. It is fantastic to be with you, and I'm really excited to be part of this event today. Utah Lake, as you all know, is critical to the state of Utah. It has many issues and many opportunities, and many of those touch water quality. And so I'm going to focus today on kind of the state of the lake and what we're working on with respect to water quality issues. I also think water quality and the Clean Water Act in particular gives us a great place to start a conversation about the interface between science and policy, which I think is a great theme for this meeting here today. So Utah Lake water quality is challenging. It is a highly productive lake. We have a lot of algal blooms. We have cyanobacteria blooms that have effects on public health, on aquatic life, on recreation, and on secondary water uses. The Clean Water Act and the Utah Water Quality Act protect the lake for all of those uses. Utah Lake is a shallow lake. The ecology is different from the ecology that we typically study in some of our deeper mountain lakes and reservoirs. So this requires us to conduct site-specific investigations. You're going to hear more today from a couple other speakers on the history of Utah Lake, so I won't spend much time on that. But it did transition, we believe, from a clearer lake state to the current eutrophic turbid lake sometime in the 20th century. In terms of the state of Utah Lake, water quality is impaired for several different uses. So we protect the lake, like I said, for aquatic life. It has a warm water fishery use and a waterfowl use. And we have impairments due to high levels of ammonia and exceedances of pH. And both of those we think are associated with productivity or high algal blooms, especially in Provo Bay. On the recreational front, we have an impairment for the harmful algal blooms, including the cyanobacteria blooms. That's impacting boating, fishing, swimming, water skiing, which are all important recreational uses on the lake. And we have another impairment that we aren't spending as much time on right now, which is a salt impairment. The total dissolved solids in Utah Lake is not supportive of the agricultural uses. So we really started our work in earnest on Utah Lake after the bloom in 2016 that many of you probably recall. You can see the satellite imagery there of the bloom, across Utah Lake that caused Utah County Health Department to close the lake for a couple of weeks. And we all sort of really started to pay a little bit more attention. The impact of that was not just in Utah County. You can see the release of water from Utah Lake into the Jordan River in that photo there. And we learned very quickly the extent of the connection between Utah Lake and Salt Lake County. This is a map here that just shows the extent of the canal system that draws from the Utah Lake system. The Division of Water Quality has several different angles that we're using to address the algal bloom issues in Utah Lake. Today, I'm going to talk mostly about the prevention, that is understanding the root causes through our Utah Lake water quality study. We also work closely with our health departments to provide health advisories to mitigate the impacts of algal blooms and protect public health. And most recently, we've been working with the Department of Natural Resources to explore treatment options for Utah Lake. As many of you probably know, and others will talk in more detail, the factors that contribute to algal blooms are complicated. We know that there are links between increasing temperatures, and you can see there we have seen increasing temperatures across Utah, including in Utah County over the last 20 years. Increased nutrient loads, and those include loads from our wastewater sources, our stormwater sources, agricultural sources, as well as natural sources. And then water clarity and water levels do have some influence as well. So we have sort of all of these different angles. Our particular angle from the Division of Water Quality is to regulate nutrient loads into Utah Lake. So we engaged in a study in 2015-16 timeframe. It is a long-term study. You can see the timeline here, but the goal is to develop nitrogen and phosphorus criteria that are protective of the lake's designated beneficial uses and a comprehensive implementation plan that will include addressing point sources, non-point sources, and internal cycling of the nutrients within Utah Lake. You can see we've committed to our regulated community not to implement new regulations until 2030. Our study is about halfway through. We should have results by 2023. The study is being conducted in a consensus-based, transparent process to support science-based decision-making and to address, to make sure that we're capturing growth. You can see here that we've got a steering committee that was approved by the Utah Lake Commission. They sat a science panel that's overseeing the study's contractors. The recommendations from the study will come back through that same pathway to the Division of Water Quality and to the Water Quality Board for adoption. This will likely require review and approval by the Utah legislature before it can be submitted to EPA. Our project is about a $3.5 million project, in addition to leveraging a number of other resources, which I've listed there. So real quick, the steering committee is fantastic. We have a 16-member steering committee. You can see who's on that here with representation from across the various stakeholder interests. Eric Ellis and I co-chair that steering committee. We have 4 representatives from the wastewater side, so 3 municipal and 1 publicly owned treatment works. We have representatives from recreation, agriculture, fish and wildlife, public health, recreation, and environmental interests. So for the last year and a half, the steering committee has spent a lot of time articulating what the water quality management goals for Utah Lake should be. And those are specific statements about the desired water quality condition to support societal, economic, and ecological values of concern for recreation, aquatic life, and agriculture. I won't go through these in detail, but you're welcome to peruse them. We have a quite long document, a table actually, that outlines all of these management goals and then the metrics that we will use to assess whether we're successful in attaining these goals. So for recreation, we want Utah Lake to support a robust recreational industry and increased recreational opportunities and experiences for the community. For aquatic life, we want Utah Lake water quality to support a robust and healthy fishery, as well as waterfowl and shorebird communities. And you can see some of those sub-goals there, but again, encourage you to have a look at the more detailed document on our website. For agriculture, we want toxins in Utah Lake not to harm livestock or crops. Pretty simple. So the steering committee sat a 10-member science panel, and I'm pleased to see some of our science panel members are presenting here today. We have 6 science panel members from Utah and 4 from out of state. These are some of the most renowned scientists working on lake issues across the country, and we're really grateful for the attention that they're putting into this project. I won't go through them all in detail, but you can see they were selected based on their discipline. We have a kind of multidisciplinary team to make sure that we're really getting the studies done in a way that's robust and can support good long-term decision making. The initial charge to the science panel from our steering committee were really 4 questions, and those 4 questions line up quite nicely with the panel or with the symposium's goals here today. The first was, what was the historical condition of Utah Lake with respect to nutrients and ecology pre-settlement, and along the historical timeline with consideration of trophic state shifts and significant transitions since settlement. And Dr. Brainy will talk a little bit about our progress against that question here today. Also, what is the current state of the lake with respect to nutrients and ecology? We've spent a lot of time developing both an online platform as well as some reports to really explain the current status with respect to nutrient loading and the dynamics within the lake, how that's affecting algal blooms and how that's affecting the ecology. Third question is, what additional information is needed to define numeric nutrient criteria that support existing beneficial uses? So again, we're developing criteria that will be approved under the Clean Water Act so that we can regulate the lake towards those goals. And then finally, is there an improved stable state that can be reached under the constraints of current water and fishery management? So as I said earlier, we're about halfway through this study. Our science panel has been working for about 3 years now, and we think we have about 3 more years. Okay, so Utah Lake is complicated. We have a number of studies that are going on. You'll hear about many of those, but basically we're trying to understand the unique site-specific nutrient dynamics of Utah Lake. We're moving now into the implementation planning stage. So this is really where the policy elements come into play. So all of that science will be used to develop and calibrate models that we can then ask questions of to evaluate future state scenarios with respect to different nutrient reductions as well as growth projections for Utah County. We will assess those against all of the goals that I mentioned earlier. One of the biggest challenges for Utah County is that we have significant growth projected. And so all of our planning and implementation feasibility analyses need to incorporate that projected growth. The red here on the map shows the urban and developed that's projected between 2010 and 2050. I want to acknowledge that the publicly owned treatment works, the wastewater folks around the county have already gotten started. Most of them are in the process of large, very expensive upgrades to their facilities to reduce nutrient loads into Utah Lake. So I want to give a shout out to them, and our Water Quality Board has been very supportive of those projects with financing in the last few years. And with that, I'll just leave it with this slide that ultimately the challenges of Utah Lake will require us to evaluate some really challenging trade-offs with respect to both costs and benefits.